join a band, if you're looking to start a band, these can be difficult to do, right? And if you've never done it before, I'm hoping this video can help you or at least give you some perspective on why it is difficult to do. Now, I had somebody in the comments, and it was a short comment, but he said, nobody will play in my band. You know, tell me how to start a band and tell me how to, get musicians and all that. And I basically asked them the question, why should someone be in a band with you? Do you have any gigs? Is there any monetary benefit? Now, look, I know a lot of people say, oh, well, money. Look, man, the reality is this. If you want good players, right? If you want the best you can get, you've got to offer them something, right? Just telling them that you're awesome and that your music's amazing, well, that could be, that very well could be. It costs a lot of money to be a musician, right? If you're a singer and you're looking for players for your band, think of the startup costs alone for being in a band. Think of how much it costs just to be in a band. Look, if you're the singer, you better have your own PA. If you're going to put together a band, it certainly would save you a lot of money if you've got a place to rehearse. All right. So PA system, rehearsal spot. All right. Now ask yourself, how nice do you want your rehearsal space? If you're a kid and, you're starting a garage band, well, then that's paying your dues time. And you should be lucky to have a roof over your head and some power to plug into and a place to learn your craft, right? But if you're an older guy trying to start a band and you want guys to come over, first of all, how safe is it? If they bring their gear over there, are they going to have to take it every single time, tear it down, or will they feel comfortable bringing a rehearsal rig over and perhaps leaving it for rehearsals? Now, if you do not have a place to rehearse, and look, just saying, oh, we can rehearse at my house. The reality is if you brought an entire band, a live drummer, guitars, basses, the whole thing, right? And you bring that into your average middle class home or lower class or trailer or whatever else, the noise that's going to be generated in that space could very quickly get the ire of your neighbors. And when the ire of your neighbors erupts, right, it could cause problems in the neighborhood. They could call the cops on you, depending on what kind of band you're in and what your bandmates are up to. That could result in some other problems. And look, man, in order to get professional players, not just guys that have never been in a band together. And look, maybe that's your goal. Maybe you just want the camaraderie of musicianship. Maybe you just want the experience of starting something and working on music with people. And I get that. That may be very well, let's say, an unprofessional situation. You're not looking to play paid gigs. You just want the joy of music and all that. And I get that concept, but you have to also understand that people live lives, they have families, they have obligations, they have jobs, they have other things going on. And spending 3 or 4 hours a lot of times rehearsing or jamming or doing stuff like that. Some people don't have the time for that. Now, there may be a lot of guys out there that are retired and may be looking to do just that. But depending on the city that you live in, there could be less people, right? If you're living in a town with only 10,000 people and there's not even a music store in that town, well, then finding musicians could be a very difficult thing. It might not happen. And maybe the nearest guys are an hour away or 2 hours away. Are they going to want to come over, drive an hour and then rehearse for another 3 hours and then drive home an hour later for nothing? At the very least, here's the deal. If you want to be professional, if you want to put together a killer band and you're a front man or you're a singer-songwriter or somebody like that, if you have a budget, if you have money to pay them, you're going to get better players. They're not going to get frustrated with you rehearsing and not having any good gigs on the books, right? Here's the other thing. Do you have gigs booked? If you don't have any gigs booked or any potential gigs, then you have to ask yourself, why are you rehearsing with this band? What is the end goal? You may have the idea to form a band, help them, get them to help you write your songs and record it. Maybe make a recording at home. Look, if you've got a computer these days, you've got a recording studio. You will need to buy a few things in order to expand that studio. And depending on how advanced you want to get and how good a recording you're going to get, you will have to buy more gear. So look, if you're broke, right, and working a job 40 hours a week, whether you're a musician, right, or someone trying to put together a band, it's going to be difficult to have the time to be able to do this, right? Guys that are working 40 hours a week and are married and have kids, they're not going to have time to go rehearse for nothing. And their wives are going to go, why are you doing this? What are you getting paid? What's going on? Why are you spending so much time at this? If there's no gigs on the books, then you have to ask yourself, where is this going? What are we doing? Now look, if you're good, if you have a budget, if you live in a city where there's a decent amount of musicians to pull from, right? And look, there's still no guarantee that you're going to find the magical formula. Look, I was in LA in the 80s, and you would have thought that there would have been, a million great singers and all this. But I can tell you honestly, from spending quite a bit of time searching for the perfect singer, I wasn't able to find him. Right. And that's out of a city and a thriving music scene and all of that, gigs on the books, a nice place to rehearse, all of those things, and a ton of songs already written, ready to go. You literally could have walked into that band, started headlining all the major clubs, and we could have gotten signed just as easily as any of the other bands. But finding that piece of the puzzle that we were missing was like a needle in a haystack. So imagine putting together a band as putting together 3 or 4 pieces of a puzzle or 3 or 4 needles out of a haystack. That is a very tough thing. It's not an easy thing putting together a band. But if you're having trouble finding anyone to do it. Ask yourself why. Why should they be in a band with me? And if you can't come up with a solid answer and a legitimate answer, look, you also have to consider, are my songs good? Am I good at what I do, right? And get an honest assessment. Look, maybe bring in a ringer. Say, hey, man, come over, listen to the songs I have. Tell me what I need to do. If there's somebody that's already in a band locally in your area who you respect their opinion, maybe approach them and say, hey, man, I'm looking to put together a band. Can you tell me what I'm doing wrong here? But I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to give you the secret to this. If you have a budget, if you can afford to pay people, and look, even offering somebody $50 a rehearsal at the very least covers their gas expenses and their strings and maybe buys them a cheeseburger on the way home from the gig or the rehearsal. So, offering something. Look, I'm looking to put together a band and I'm going to pay $50 each to rehearse in my garage. And you get a drummer and a bass player and a guitar player. And you're looking at $150 a rehearsal. Now, if you don't have the budget to pay $150 for a once a week rehearsal, then you got to ask yourself, do I even need to put together a band? Maybe what you need to do is, hire somebody to write some riffs for you and put together some decent demos and do that. But again, nobody's going to do that for free. The days of putting together a band for free start when you're very young. When that is the difference. If you're a young guy and you're in school and you meet, a buddy that plays bass, or you teach some guy to play bass and you've got a drummer, that in your school who's amazing, and you guys get together and form something and rehearse. Those are the glory days. Those are the days when you're a kid. We all used to do it back in the day. We were all in garage bands of some sort, right? Getting together guys from school and playing some of the songs that you all enjoyed. That was how we learned how to be in a band. But for us older guys, right, if somebody, contacted me here in Florida and said, I've got an original project, I want you to play guitar in it. The first question is, how often do you rehearse? And are the rehearsals paid? And how many gigs do you have booked on the calendar? That would be my first question. But here's the more likely scenario. Right? I got offered to play with a band here, I don't know, 6 months ago or whatever. They already had a gig on the books. They already could tell me how much it paid. They already had a song list. Here's the songs you would play. And it pays this much. And at that point in time, I have to decide, is this worth the amount of money being paid? For me, it was not. So it was not enough to get me to go and put the time in to learn the songs and drive down to the gig and bring my rig and do all, string up the guitars and all that. For me, it wasn't enough, right? There wasn't enough incentive, right? So if you have no budget, if you have no gigs, if you have no songs, you have to tell yourself, look, I don't have enough to offer somebody, right? And look, this might be a case where I need to hire one person. I need to hire somebody. Maybe there's a local guitar player you can hire to help you write your songs and put together your demos. At least then you would have something. Having a demo at least would get your foot in the door to maybe recruiting other players and being able to put together a band. There's the other option of just going, hey, making a Facebook post, finding the local musician group in your area or closest big city and saying, hey, I'm looking to just get together with some guys and jam. Metal, all genres. And then seeing if you get any bites. At that point in time, you're going to get what you get. And you can't be picky at that point. If you don't have a budget, if you don't have, a great place to rehearse, if you don't have a great PA system and all of this stuff going for you, then you're going to have to take what you can get. Find a beginner player, an older beginner player, and work with them. Maybe that's the way to go. But man, putting together a band is a very difficult thing. And you have to ask yourself, why should somebody be in a band with me? And if you can't come up with an answer to that question, then perhaps you're not ready to start a band.